Hello everyone, this is Kat and welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. This will be the reading of a one-shot entitled You're Expelled. Here's the summary. After the quirk assessment test, Izuku Midori is expelled from UA. After this, he takes the only logical course of action, attend UA anyways, and hide from Eraserhead like his life depends on it, which it might. Meanwhile, the rest of UA need to decide on what to do with this reverse truancy. Hijinks ensue. You're expelled. The words played in Izuku's head over and over again. After Aizawa-sensei, Eraserhead, said that to him, Izuku went back to the changing room and got back into his school uniform. He had nothing else to change into. Once in the hall, he just stood there until the bell rang. When it did, students flooded the hallway, destroying his privacy. Izuku went to his classroom and sat through class on autopilot. He'd done it plenty of times before UA. He did the same thing for the next class and the next, which brought him to where he currently was. He glanced up and saw yet another of his teachers giving him a strange look. Was he muttering again? Nobody said anything. Sure, the teachers and other students had given him weird looks, but nobody had stayed quiet before. Besides, they were probably just staring at him because he was the one student who managed to get expelled on his first day. Wait. He had gotten expelled. And he was still here. In class? What? Why hadn't anyone told him? I mean, sure, he shouldn't need to be told that he'd been expelled after Eraserhead had said it to his face, but still, why hadn't the teacher said anything? Had they not known? It couldn't be, since they kept giving him strange looks. Now what? This wasn't his last period, and it wasn't like he could just keep attending his classes as long as Eraserhead didn't catch him. Could he? Could he? None of his classmates had said anything, even Kachan. None of his teachers had said anything. He couldn't just avoid his homeroom teacher all year. He wasn't even enrolled anymore, but it would take a while to get a new school, and UA had one of the best curriculums in the country. Maybe he could just get a head start while looking for a new school. But what about Mom? What would she think? Maybe he shouldn't tell Mom just yet, not until he found another school. After all, she'd be less worried if he already had found a solution and had one lined up, right? He showed up at school the next day, just after homeroom. He hadn't been sure if his pass still worked, so he snuck his way in. No security had confronted him. His teachers even gave him a confused look, but shrugged and just kept teaching. His classmates only occasionally had threw him confused glances. By lunch, nobody had directly questioned him about it. Maybe this could work after all. In the teacher's lounge. So, Shota, how does it feel to have only, 19 students now? Yamada asked. A massive headache. They're loud, rambunctious, and irrational. So teenagers? Hizashi said. Whatever. Hey, Shota, Namuri said. You're going to have one of your power naps in your office, or would you like to have lunch with me and Hizashi and talk about everything that's happened since the last school year had ended? Shota had a brief look of fear before quickly grabbing his sleeping bag and his juice box. I'm going to my office. Feel free to leave me alone. Hizashi watched him leave, waited, then checked outside to make sure he wasn't coming back. He glanced back at Namuri, who seemed to be checking if Shota had left anything behind. She nodded at Hizashi. Okay, so are we going to talk about the green-haired kid? He said. Across the room, all the other teachers, sans All Might, who was absent, had nodded. He showed up again today. Does Shota seriously not know what he's doing? What should we do? I say let him stay. I like his spirit. But we can't just let him walk around campus unchecked, Cementos said. He's not wandering. He's staying in class, said Snipe. But we still can't grade him, said Cementos. I say we keep quiet. I want to see if Shota ever finds out, Namuri said with a grin. If Shota re-enrolls him, it'll be like it never happened, said Ectoplasm. Not if Shota catches him first, Hizashi shuddered. Now, everyone. I think there's an easy solution, Nezu said as he walked up and stood on the table. What is it? Hound Dog asked. A prank. Let's see how long Midoriya can last without Shota finding out that he's here. Has Shota tried to re-enroll him? Said Powerloader. Not that I'm aware of, but he only would have expelled Midoriya if he felt Midoriya had no potential as a hero. If Midoriya lasts long enough, Shota will have to see that he has the potential, and he'll let him in, especially if he does well in his classes, or Khan will take him. Khan nodded. Even if for some reason that couldn't work, this would be an excellent grounds for a very glowing recommendation to one of the many hero schools who would wait to snatch up Shota's expellees the moment that they start applying. Something about stealth skills and dedication, Nezu said. Sounds fun, one teacher said. Can we make bets on how long that kid'll last? Another had said. Will any of you try to sabotage Midoriya for the sake of winning the bet? Nezu looked around. They all shook their heads. The kid's too nice to do that to him. Helping him first, winning the bet later. Nezu nodded. Good, then betting will be allowed, and if for some reason you're tempted to cheat, remember, he smiled at them, I will find out, and I will enjoy my vengeance on you, greatly. Hizashi gulped at whatever Nezu had in mind. Nobody would dare to try and sabotage Midoriya now. After a long silence, Snipe said, I bet 100 that he'll last 2 more days. Snipe, I'll raise you to 3 days for 200. 700, I bet the whole week. What about the USJ? Eraser will be there so he couldn't hide, but if he misses it, he'll be missing out on an important part of his hero education, said 13. Simple. I'll delay the USJ to the end of the week. First weeks are often chaotic and prone to unexpected issues, after all. We will see if he can last until then. If he doesn't last that long, then whoever guessed right gets the pot. If he makes it until the end, I'll be giving you all a big bonus check. Either way, Midori will be formally re-enrolled, said Nezu. Can we help him? Of course, said Nezu. The teachers all nodded at that. What if Shota asks to have him re-enrolled? Then what else could I do but re-enroll him? Nezu said. Will we be telling the boy your plans to get him re-enrolled by the end of the week, even if he's caught? If we don't, he'll be constantly worried about getting thrown out, asked 13. No, Nezu said. I want him to do his best, so we'll see how long he can last. After it's over, I'll give him extra credit to compensate for any undue worry. It'll be called an extended stealth assignment. Besides, he's the one who decided to keep going to a hero school after being expelled, so his beady eyes suddenly looked very intimidating. None of you will tell. Is that understood? After a long moment, everyone nodded. Excellent. I will warn All Might not to tell Shota of Midoriya's continued presence here. The rest of you spread the word to any of our other teachers not here besides Shota. Well, time to see how long we can keep this up. And with that, Nezu walked out of the door. Nezu did remember to tell All Might to keep his knowledge of Midoriya's attendance from Shota. He just forgot to mention that it was going to be part of an elaborate prank, or that Midoriya would be re-enrolled by the end of the week. One forgets such minor details when dealing with the stresses of running a school, after all. Meanwhile, at the school lunchroom. So, Deku, what are you doing here today? Uraraka asked. Weren't you expelled? Obviously, he's been re-enrolled once UA realized its mistake, said Ida. After all, he couldn't stay here without permission. That would be a violation of countless school protocols and be completely inappropriate both for a student and an upcoming hero. It's just unfortunate that he was forced to miss homeroom. Well, should he tell the truth or go along with Ida's idea? That would be lying, and he can't lie to his friends, but if he tells the truth they might report him. But by homeroom tomorrow it would be obvious that he was still expelled and trying to avoid— Oh no, Eraserhead's here. Izuku dove under the table as Eraserhead had walked into the cafeteria. He stayed there until Eraserhead had passed their table, then kept staring at Eraserhead as a prey animal watches a predator until he had left the room. He turned back to Ida and Uraraka. They were staring, jaws dropped. Uh-oh. You did not, Uraraka said. You snuck in. Izuku looked away, feeling his cheeks warming up. Maybe. Ida said, But you can't. That's not— Midoriya, I insist that you cease this behavior at once. It's inappropriate for a former student to conduct themselves in this way. Uraraka said, What's even your plan? Izuku told them. Ida was honest. This plan could not possibly work. If you're caught, you'll have an even darker mark on your record than the expulsion. They could send you to jail, and it forces us into the dilemma of reporting you or being complicit in your transgression. Maybe not, Uraraka said, looking up thoughtfully. I mean, he's been in class in front of the teachers, and none of them had a problem with it. Even the principal said hi to him, by name, in the hall on the way here, so he must be fine with the two. And Deku's only doing it to keep from falling behind before moving to a different school. She solemnly turned to Ida. Shouldn't we respect our teacher's decision and let our friend keep from falling behind in his education? But we— Very well. I shall respect our teacher's decision and wishes. Good luck on continuing with your education, Midoriya. Izuku smiled. Thanks, guys. It really means a lot to me. Then Eraserhead came back, forcing him to hide under the table again, while his friends froze in what they seemed to think were normal poses. Not that he was one to judge. For the next few days, Izuku would get up, go to UA, attend his classes, talk to his classmates, and avoid Eraserhead like his life depended on it, which it might. It hadn't always been easy. Fortunately, Eraserhead didn't seem to walk through the halls often, and his all-black costume stood out in a sea of beige. Also, fortunately, Izuku's teacher seemed to be on his side. Now, All Might said. "We begin our first battle. Young Midoriya, I'll need you to, go warn Recovery Girl of the possible incoming patients. I will have your team go once without you, and then again with you at the end." Yes, sir, All Might," Izuku said before running off. After the battle trial was ended, All Might expressed hope that he wouldn't accidentally give Eraserhead a recording without Izuku in it, which he apparently did. What a shame. Something similar happened the next day in English. Jiro whispered something to Present Mike while pointing at Izuku. Then Present Mike had turned to Izuku and said, "Midoriya, could you go to the supply closet and search for, extra books, please?" "What sort of extra?" "You'll know them when you see them. Go." Izuku grabbed his notebook and hurried in. He'd just closed the door when he heard Eraserhead's voice. He stayed absolutely quiet and said nothing, and just hoped that he didn't suspect anything. "Why are you acting weirder than usual?" He suspected something. "Whatever, I'll be back in my office napping. If you need anything, please hesitate to ask." That was Oh, right. I need to grab some supplies from the closet. "You can't do that." "Why not?" "Because we're undersupplied?" "Mike, I was in there yesterday. We are not. And you didn't even ask what I wanted." Izuku realized he needed a place to hide. He looked around and saw a place. He heard footsteps, hurried into his hiding place, the door opened, and Eraserhead had walked in. Izuku really hoped Eraserhead wouldn't look up, otherwise he'd see a former UA student awkwardly wedging himself between the walls just above the door. Eraserhead grabbed some supplies and began walking out. His head had been facing the ground. Keep looking down, keep looking down. He stopped, right in front of the notebook that Izuku just realized he had dropped. "Stop looking down." Eraserhead bent over and grabbed the notebook. He picked it up, walked out the door, and... "The student left this in here. I'll let you handle it." Izuku heard him walk out the door then. After a few minutes, Izuku had walked back into the room where Mike had given him the book back with a light chastisement about keeping track of his things, and that was the most eventful part of his day. Well, aside from the full-blown panic attack when the alarms went off, but frankly, getting trampled by a stampede was probably a more pleasant death than being caught by Eraserhead. Another time. "Ah, Midoriya, what a pleasure to see you," said Principal Nezu, walking up to him. He glanced at the bathroom right next to them. "You know, I find it fascinating how patterns persist throughout the years, like students all using the bathroom just after classes get out, which you should do." He glanced at the corner behind him. "Right now." Taking the hint, Izuku dashed inside. Just as the door had closed, he heard Nezu say, "Shota, what a pleasure to see you." Even the students were on his side. Izuku was walking down the hall to lunch before a group of students suddenly surrounded him and squeezed him between them, blocking him from seeing anything. "Hello, Aizawa-sensei," said one on the opposite side of the hall. "Wonderful day, isn't it?" Shota replied to Fuwa's question with a grunt. On the other side of the hallway, a large group of his former second years were clumped together tightly, giving him a wide set of very fake smiles. He stared at them. They stared at him. "Whatever. I'll let their class's teacher deal with whatever they're up to. I'm busy dealing with the USJ trip being delayed and Nezu's sudden lapse in competence regarding Midoriya's paperwork. Whatever this is has absolutely nothing to do with that." He walked away. The group released Izuku. "You're the kid Aizawa expelled who kept coming to class, right?" one of them said. Izuku nodded. They all stared at him with awe. He even heard one whisper, "The boy of legend." "But who are you?" Izuku asked them. "Class 2A. "Really?" The one who'd spoken with Aizawa, a girl with heavy eyeliner and round fluffy earrings, had spoke. "He expelled all of us last year. Then had us re-enrolled. It wasn't pleasant, but in the end it did help us grow." "Still pisses me off, though," one of the boys had said. "Has he tried to re-enroll you yet?" the girl asked. Izuku shook his head. "Not that I know of." The girl frowned. "That's weird. Your classmates all seem to think that you're hero material. No matter, we're all rooting for you." She smiled along with her classmates. "Anything to help a fellow expellee," one had said. "And it lets us screw with Sir Expels a lot. We hit 2 birds for the price of 1, said one of the boys. "It's hit 2 birds with 1 stone, one of the girls had said. "Like I said." She turned to Izuku. "And that is why he was expelled." "Hey!" Izuku smiled. "Thank you. All of you." And that was how it was for the next few days. Unfortunately, he had not found any alternate schools to go to. Not that he'd really looked. He just hadn't really had the time. Really. He certainly wasn't dragging his feet or anything. That'd be reckless and irresponsible. Tomorrow was the class trip, where avoiding his former homeroom teacher would be impossible. He walked down the hall to lunch with Ida and Uraraka, considering his options. He could just skip that day, or maybe be at school to see if Eraserhead was there for the trip and skip if he was. Maybe he should ask advice from class 2. And Uraraka just nudged him. He looked up. Eraserhead was listing down the hall. Izuku moved to the other side of Uraraka while she and Ida had tried to block him with their bodies. Would it be enough? Shota's mind couldn't help but dwell on how frustrating the last few days had been. First of all, Nezu had delayed Midoriya being re-enrolled almost an entire week. If he didn't do it today, Shota would just go to Midoriya himself. All Might attracting those vultures, All Might being inexperienced as a teacher, all of his friends and co-workers acting crazier than normal, and possible villains breaking in when the press had entered. If one more thing goes wrong. Ida and Uraraka walked by. He glanced over to them to give them a greeting of a grunt. That's when he noticed the green curl sticking out behind their backs, like some sort of wild bush. He stopped. They froze. He walked around to them to see a very sheepish boy with very curly green hair looking down, apparently under the impression the other couldn't see him, if he couldn't see them. It was funny. He could have sworn that he'd expelled that same kid almost a week ago. Spent the rest of the week trying to bring him back, and now the week's problems were suddenly making a lot more sense. Ida, Uraraka, go to class. But Sensei. Now. He didn't wait to see what they did. He grabbed Midoriya and dragged him off. Hizashi entered the room with the other teachers. Shota had called them there right after classes ended for the day, saying it was important. He looked around to see if any of them had any idea of what was going on. None of them seemed to. All Might was in his buff form, though. He hoped it didn't have anything to do with Midoriya. After all, the little listener had done so well, and he didn't want anything to go wrong now. The door slammed open, and revealing Shota. And, oh shit, what the hell had he done? Behind Shota, wrapped in his capture weapon, was Izuku Midoriya, seemingly beaten within an inch of his life. His clothes were scuffed, torn in several places, and his face had a massive bruise over one eye, with 2 more on his cheek and forehead. He limped into the room behind Shota. I found our infiltrator, Shota said. What the hell, Shota? Namuri said. Have you lost your mind? Said Ectoplasm. What do you mean he's the infiltrator? Asked All Might, his face grave and serious. This boy here was a student on the first day of school, until, that is, I expelled him. And you all were notified of his expulsion immediately and would have prevented him from attending your classes, while the UA barrier would keep him from returning to UA. For him to be here should be impossible. However, villains broke into the school several days ago. We never found out what they'd been doing. The answer's obvious. Midoriya's a spy, and they used the break-in to give him access to the school again. There's no other rational explanation. Unfortunately, he refused to confess when I interrogated him. The little listener wasn't a spy, Hizashi said. He's been in class since before the... Hizashi realized what he just said. Shota looked at him, his face expressionless. That's impossible. He was expelled. You wouldn't let a student keep attending classes after they were expelled, would you? The teachers all began finding any place to look but at Shota. What? You all knew? Then why didn't you tell me so I wouldn't have to keep pestering Nezu to reinstate him? They all turned toward Nezu to glare at him. Nezu gave them a small grin. All Might looked at the teachers. While helping to educate young Midoriya and trying to get him back in was noble, hiding your plans from him like this was unacceptable. We're just lucky that it isn't even worse. Indeed. I only overlooked one detail, Shota. Shota put his hands behind his back while Nezu continued. I never imagined you would take such drastic, irrational, and downright illegal actions. I apologize for my actions, sir. I'm just glad that, as All Might said, it didn't become... The door slammed open again. Where's my baby? A stout woman with shoulder-length green hair had been tied back into a bun, who was obviously Midoriya's mother, had burst into the room. She ran to her son and hugged him. Poor baby, what did they do to you? She wailed. Then she looked at the staffers and glared at them. How dare you? I'll sue you for all that you have, and tell everyone, and the media, she yelled angrily, and the staff shuddered. Great, Shota, just great. You managed to almost kill a student, successfully kill your teaching career, and kill the school, all in the same day. What's next? By the way, I didn't actually attack Midoriya, Shota said. What? Sure enough, Midoriya had wiped the bruises right off his face, with a wet handkerchief while sporting a broad grin, which was shared by his mother. All Might leapt out in front of them. Surprise! Shota glared and just pushed him aside. Anyways, as I was saying, he flashed them a wide, creepy grin. This was a logical ruse to teach all of you the value of honesty and not messing with my teaching duties. But how? Said Namuri. Simple, Shota said. I caught Midoriya in the halls today with Ida and Uraraka. I knew he hadn't applied or been sent to general studies through my efforts to re-enroll him, so I took him aside, and he spilled everything. Since you've all been having so much fun letting him stay in your classes without telling me, I decided to have a little fun of my own, and I had Midoriya call his mother to help." At this, Mrs. Midoriya had smiled at them. "He asked if I knew how to apply makeup to fake bruises. Luckily I did." "But how did you get him to agree?" Hizashi said. "The little listener is such a shy, sweet—" "That's where I come in," All Might said. "Young Ida and Uraraka expressed their concern to me, so I went after Aizawa. Even when I had agreed to his plan, young Midoriya was still unsure, so we offered him a deal." At this, he signed a t-shirt Mrs. Midoriya had held out to him, while Shota signed a notebook and, reluctantly, the t-shirt as well. "You sold us out for a couple of autographs?" The little traitor had turned to them with a massive grin on his face. "Not just any autographs. All Might's and Eraserheads on one of my collectible t-shirts, and Eraserheads on his page in my notebook. I never thought I'd even get Eraserheads." "That was all it took to betray us?" Midoriya eagerly nodded. "Now," Mrs. Midoriya turned to Nezu, "you will re-enroll my son immediately and never try this sort of thing again." She wasn't even glaring at Hizashi, and he still felt it. Honestly, he preferred the idea of fighting villains to this. He was somehow even more relieved Shota hadn't really injured Midoriya. If he had, they'd all be doomed. Of course," Nezu said. Right away." He began typing on his phone, his paws noticeably shaking. "Thank you," Mrs. Midoriya said, her demeanor innocent and sweet again. "I will be coming tomorrow to discuss this with you further." That was jarring. Still, better not be here when she comes. "Not that this hasn't been an entertaining meeting, but I'm taking a nap," Shota said as he closed Midoriya's notebook and handed it back to him. As Midoriya and his mother had walked to the door, Shota said, "I'll have that extra credit imputed into your grades, as well as whatever the other teachers had planned to give you." "Thank you, Sensei," Midoriya said. He and his mother then left. Shota was walking out too, saying, "After all this excitement, I hope that the USJ trip tomorrow goes without any unexpected difficulties. This was more than enough excitement for 1 week." He closed the door. Ectoplasm then turned to the other teachers and said, "I don't suppose this is a bad time to ask you all to pay up?" All right, everyone. This concludes the one-shot entitled You're Expelled. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's short and sweet, and I've always liked it. It's one I consistently reread. Let me know your thoughts and reactions, and as always, thank you so much for listening.